Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right, guys, welcome to my live stream. This is the a guest that today, finally, on Spotify and most of the music platforms, this album, Worst Places to Work, is available everywhere. So you can stream it for free, which is really cool. It's an album I'm pretty proud of. I'm going to just continue writing music and releasing it whenever I get to kind of 10-ish songs. It's Sean Connery's favorite sport songs. So like once it reaches 10-ish, that's my bad joke for the day. Anyhow, so what we're going to be, so that's good news. And, you guys should check that out. It's rock and roll. It's, basically a whole album dedicated to terrible workplaces. And I think that's a fun theme. So today what we're going to do is finish up the rough for page 115 of Not Death But Love, the Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And then after that, we're going to move on to 116, probably in the next stream, which I'll be doing today as well. I did a lot of the roughs and a lot of the thumbnails and the list and all that fun stuff off stream late last night. And now I'm ready to hit it hard and kind of get these things done. So, yeah. So here we go. So let's go to our daily stream. Boom. And right down there, you're going to see the section of the script that we're working on, which we actually don't need anymore since we've already done that part of it. So I'll go ahead and close out the script. And right now we have our thumbnail underneath that I worked on before that I'm going to use as like a blue line underneath, and we're going to go ahead and rough it out. And I've started the rough for panel 1 of this. That's going to be showing, it's like zooming out and showing kind of where they're located in the opera house. And it's a particular opera house in Italy. So that's what we're going to be working on, and potentially maybe working on some art and stuff too. Maybe listening to some music off of that album. So now I have two new albums out. There's They Don't Care About the Born, and then there's Worst Places to Work. And so those are the two. So right here, what we're going to have is we're going to have just like very tiny indications of people who are kind of getting back to their seats for the opera, because the curtain is going back down. So, yeah, that should hopefully kind of get us where we need to be. I had a really fun game of chess with my son. He was really interested in chess. And that's kind of fun. So I haven't played chess in forever. And he's pretty good at it. So I was very impressed. Dylan's here. He said hello. How's it going, Dylan? How you doing, man? I hope well. I hope all is going good. So here we're just doing like some slight indications of what, these people are going to look like. And just kind of like indicate like some small indications for a crowd scene, and then we'll kind of work out from there. Um, let's see here. My wife and I are both like, again, this month has been really interesting because we've been both just like under deadline on books. Dylan said, "I'm all right, just relaxing. How was your day?" It was good. It was a good day so far. A lot of like resting up.
I'm drawing chess pieces. I was like, "Oh, that horse is really fat." He says it's cute.
It is cute. That's funny. He's making his own chessboard and having his mom draw the pieces for it. But yeah, so it's mostly been like a bit of a catch-up day, like a lot of resting. It gets like super hot this time of day too. And so that's kind of like a wild thing about just living in the desert is you get used to the kind of wackiness that is, you know, wild, insane heat. But I'm excited about the music that's out. It's been a really fun journey, kind of enjoying this this bout of muse and inspiration that I've had the last few months. It's been just really fun to like put that out and put it out there in the world and let the three people who want to hear it hear it. Dylan said it's 106 here. Wow. I'm not sure quite what the temperature's gotten to here. I think it's not too far off from.
Where does this person live?
I think Dylan lives in Arizona. I think so. Yeah, that's rough. Let me know if I'm wrong on that, Dylan. But I think he lives in Arizona. He said, "Did you hear that the UK is going through a heat wave? Can you guess the temperature?" Let me guess. If it's the UK and it's a heat wave, it's like in the 80s. Yeah, Dylan said he lives in Arizona. Yeah, so that's like the one place in the world that gets hotter than where we are. At least in the Western Hemisphere. If you see me doing this, it's literally just me fighting an allergy. Do. So right now I'm just gonna kind of have people kind of gathering in their seats here toward the bottom. These are mostly placeholders. Maybe a couple people having a conversation. Again, mostly placeholders for what will come later. But we just need to have like a few. Dylan said, allergies." Yeah, they've been like I get them so bad. And I think my son got the same genes because like when he was a kid, he used to get like nosebleeds all the time. And and that's something I used to get a lot when I was a kid too because of my allergies. So he got mostly the good genes, but a couple of the bad ones. In the lottery of life, he turned out pretty good, but he did end up with dad's bad allergies. The Kemble allergies. Yeah, he said the UK heat wave temperature was like 72. That's what I figured. I figured it'd be in like the 70s or the 80s where they're like, "Oh my goodness, it's so hot here. I can't believe it." I don't know why that's how everybody in the UK talks in my head, but that's what I've decided. That's how they talk. Let's see here. Couple of things that I want to kind of clarify and get get kind of working here. I think we are getting close to kind of moving on to the next panel, which is very exciting. And maybe there can be like a gentleman, like a few people kind of making their way back to the auditorium.
I don't know. Whoever made chess, I guess.
Dylan said, I don't want to gatekeep heat. It's not normally that temperature, but 72 isn't really that hot. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you think 72 is hot, you haven't lived heat. That's like saying sriracha is like a really crazy, wild hot sauce. It's just not. If you think that's heat, you haven't had heat. Right? And I love sriracha, and I love 72-degree days. So nothing wrong with either of those things, but they're not hot. Dylan said ketchup is too spicy. It is kind of like that. Yeah, it's very equivalent to that. This mustard is just, oh, it's too wild. It's too spicy. It's too crazy. This mayonnaise has way too much heat on it. Let's see here. All right, so what has been going on? So worst workplaces or worst places to work is out. Now on all streaming platforms, so you can check that out at any time you wish, which is kind of exciting. Also, I read a little more on I'm not going to get the specifics right about this because I just read about it this morning. But there's a group of people who are Trump staffers that are apparently setting up a contingency plan for if Trump becomes president. And they're basically like interviewing people and trying to kind of set up staffers before, so that the second, he gets into office, he'll have like a kind of pre-ordered, indoctrinated staff. And they also have all these plans for like how his executive powers will be expanded in his second term. And some of it's pretty disturbing. Not a surprise. But yeah, some of it's pretty disturbing. There's this contingency in government, and I'm going to get the words wrong for this, I'm sure, because again, I just kind of read over it this morning. But I guess in the government, there's a difference between, workers that are in the government, they're government employees, and they're at the behest of the president. Like they work for the executive, and they kind of change over. That staff basically changes over anytime the office changes, right? So whoever's in office, those people will step aside or get let go, and then the next people will, basically take their place, and that's a pretty normal procedure. But in government, there's a whole group of people who they want experts. Like they don't want to be bleeding talent all the time because it's kind of important positions to have expertise in. And some of these would be positions of like science in particular, like, right, where you have scientists and they're hired as like a nonpartisan position where it's really hard to fire them, like even as the executive, because the position is just, there's going to be like most scientists. A good example is like Anthony Fauci or Francis Collins would be another good example, where these are people who've served for Republicans, for Democrats, for basically, a million presidents, and have grown to be experts in their field. And so, like, they've served multiple administrations. You kind of want experts in those positions. Like a doctor is a good example. Like a doctor, do you want somebody doing surgery on you who literally just started last week, or do you want like a seasoned doctor who kind of knows what they're doing, working on something like that? And I think most rational humans would be like, okay, yeah, those positions you'd probably want to retain experts, and they'd need to be like apolitical positions. But one of the plans that they're talking about is, if he gets into office, kind of rescinding that. So allowing the executive to pretty much like fire anyone who doesn't like swear absolute fealty to his party and his platform and his plan. And that sounds like a dictatorial nightmare. Well, like one of the issues with that Russia's been having actually with the war in Ukraine is Putin hears a lot of things about his military, some of which aren't true, right? Because basically the way Putin's government goes is you kind of tell Putin what he wants to hear. Like when you have an absolute ruler like that, who surrounds themselves with a lot of yes men, it's like basically if Putin asks you like, how's the military? You're like, sir, it's the strongest military in the world. If your answer isn't that, you get killed, or fired. So like people around Putin are kind of like yes men who are going to tell him whatever he needs to hear. And sometimes that can be disastrous because, then it can lead you to do stupid things like invade a country when you're not quite as prepared. You're not quite as prepared as you thought you were. Your resources aren't quite what you thought they were. Your training of your troops isn't quite what you thought it was. And how that happens with dictators all the time, because they surround themselves with basically sycophants and suck-ups who will tell them whatever they want to hear. And so what it ends up doing when it comes to things like the sciences, right, is it can create really dangerous scenarios where the last thing you want for like a nuclear scientist to say is whatever the president wants to hear, right? You kind of want that to be somebody who's going to say, yeah, this won't work, but we're working on this, and this is how this will work. Like basically tell the truth. The last thing you want is just someone who's like, basically going to lie about something like the nuclear arsenal or the safeness of the use of a nuclear weapon, or like the safeness of a military plan, or like the fallout from it. Like you don't want somebody who's a yes man who's just going to be like, yeah, that's a great decision, let's just do it, because that can be really dangerous. That can lead you into real big problems, right? With fallout that wasn't anticipated. And it can also lead to a weird world of disinformation, right? Because if everybody is controlled by the executive, then you literally do have like a scenario where all information regarding anything, like the safety of your food, like all of this stuff, is going to be filtered through the lens of one single person. which is kind of against it's the antithesis of the design and structure of the Constitution, which is to have separated powers. And the reason you want separated powers is for a balance of power, right? You want a system of checks and balances to kind of keep corrupt power in check. Like, you don't want one power being so strong that it can't be checked by another. And so that's disturbing. And then there's talk of like all kinds of stuff, like basically like attacking the education system. You know, there was a quote by Trump recently where he called Democrats and people who don't support him vermin, and was saying they should be treated like vermin. And he's talked about a lot about like utilizing the military, utilizing the power of the federal government to kind of keep people in line and get people to support and, you know, basically propagate his agenda. And I read that, and I saw the polling, because, you know, he's polling pretty well, and that was a little scary. It's a little disturbing where we might end up. But if we end up there and you voted for the guy, I don't know. You know, maybe again, like I said this on my stream yesterday, maybe that's just what people want who are on that side. Like, they want, you know, an authoritarian regime, as long as the authoritarian is kind of enforcing their morality and their kind of their agenda. Like, they'll kind of look the other way while power is being completely corruptly abused. So I don't know. Who knows? But that was an interesting one where I was like, that would be a big breach, like that, you know, like really hasn't happened. I don't even think under Nixon. Like, I know that kind of led to Nixon resigning, because initially Nixon was tried to fire his the guys who were doing the investigations. Initially, he basically tried to like quash you know, the whole Watergate scandal, because, you know, he's like, hey, you don't have to talk about the bugging of the DNC headquarters that happened, you know, or these break-ins, or like my secret crew of people that were, you know, the cleanup crew that would basically do illegal acts. We don't have to talk about that. We're just going to fire everybody. And like that actually led to, you know, more scrutiny of him and like impeachment, you know, and from his own party too. That particular move started making his own party like, I don't know, something weird is happening here. I don't see that happening now. I don't know if the other party cares. Like, I don't know if they care about democracy. I think democracy is like maybe annoying to some of these people. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe that's something I've been thinking about lately, and it's a little scary. However, I'm also, you know, working on this rough, which is not scary. So that's nice. I will say though, like, you know, I wouldn't want any president, even when I supported, to be surrounded by yes men. That's a real dangerous scenario. There are some positions where you need yes men, you know, where it's like, let's say you're in wartime, right? And you have to make immediate decisions. Then yeah, it kind of makes sense to have somebody who's just going to like kind of pull through and carry the, you know, the weight of whatever choice you have to make. But even when analyzing those decisions, even if they're split second decisions, you do need that reality check. You need that reality check of people who speak truth. I've definitely had that in my life, where sometimes I've been about to make like a really stupid call, and I'm thankful for having people in my life who would speak truth, right, to what whether what I was going to do was like a good thing or a bad thing. And we've all seen like delusional actors and stuff, like weird people in Hollywood, um, you know, who like have just heard yes their whole life. They've become so successful. Like you've seen it with, we've definitely all seen it with musicians where they've become so successful, financially and stuff, that they start surrounding themselves with just people who are sycophantic and hanging out with them all the time and basically saying everything they do is brilliant. And uh and it's always a little tragic to see that, because it creates this like delusion in the figure. uh you'll start to see this like delusion in the figure, right, where it's like they'll kind of put out like new work, or take on like some weird project. A good example is like do you guys remember Garth Brooks' Chris Gaines thing? Chris Gaines was the byproduct of somebody who had surrounded himself with like way too many yes men and way too many kind of like weird sycophantic people who just said, yeah, that's a great idea. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not a big fan of Garth Brooks stuff in general, but anyone who was being honest around Garth Brooks would have been like, dude, may not be a good idea. Where he's like, I'm going to create an alternate persona and come up with this whole thing and do a VH1 documentary about it. And it's like, at no point did somebody say, this may not be a good thing for your career. Thomas said it's a difficult balance. How do you keep the power of the non-elected bureaucracy under control? Well, I mean, they're under control by like their performance. Like that's usually the only way you can kind of get rid of those employees, is like you keep them in check like you'd keep at a workplace. But they're kind of like almost like a tenured professor or something, where you really have to have a monumental amount of evidence, and it has to be like a workplace related reason rather than what Trump wants, which is he can just fire them at will. For whatever, with no backing or bearing, and basically all he needs to say is like, they didn't support me politically. And that's a dangerous scenario. Nice. Pepsi said, 100% agree with you, Josh. Humans are the worst of the animal kingdom. But the key thing is, you just don't want a dictator. And if you want a dictator, you aren't American. Like that's the key thing. It's like, if somebody is all about like an executive that has absolute power, they're not a fan of this government or of the Constitution. They want a totally different country. And so those people are like, in my opinion, if you're for like a religious extreme form of government that's headed by like an almost dictatorial figure, and you're kind of interested in that being where our country goes, if you're ever pretending to like our country, I would have a hard time believing it, because it's like it's just so antithetical to the Constitution and what the founders envisioned, to what this country is about. Yeah. All right, so we're going to continue this rough in a second. I'm going to get some water because it is like 100 degrees here. I don't know if it's quite 106. It might be in the 101s, though. It's definitely very hot. So I'm going to get some water, and then we'll continue roughing this page. Thomas said, most of this trouble would take care of itself if more power went to the local authorities, where they are more responsible and closer to the people. Yeah, but I mean, that's another problem, is like, I mean, you've got to think, in the case of, a Trump presidency, this is a man who had no problem overstepping the power of the state by creating his own fake set of electors within a state, basically overriding the state and the people. of that state and the local state government. So if you want more localized, you're definitely going to want to not move towards full total dictatorial power. That's my own thought. If you want more local power, stepping in the direction of totalitarian rule is probably not going to get you to more local power. Yeah. All right, so we are going to play a trailer, and this one is Home Shopping Crumble, and then I'll be right back.
Well, thank you, Colleen. I hope your daughter Kelly does well at North Carolina State this year. Well, we got another caller on the line. Elizabeth from Phoenix, Arizona. Elizabeth, what can we do for you? Are you ready to do some shopping, girl?
Oh, yes, Terry. I am ready to do some shopping today. I'm interested in that 2-book set you have. 2 Stories and Jacob's Apartment.
Oh, well, that's a great choice.
In fact, I bought these books before. I gave a set to my grandson, Hunter. These books are amazing.
Well, they sure are, and if you buy both of them, you really get the whole feel of the whole Joshua Kemble universe. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do, Terry. These books are remarkable because, for one, you can take them anywhere. You could put them in your car, and you can go to the park or the river. We've gone to the river. My husband Taylor and I, we just love it. And I murdered my husband at the river. Yeah, I did. But these still are amazing books.
All right, guys, welcome back. We're working on panel 2 of Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Yeah, so it's been a pretty fun morning. Like, I don't know how many of you guys do chess. I'm not a great chess player. I haven't really played a lot of it in my life. I'm not a terrible chess player, but I'm usually, like, when it comes to chess, I think like maybe 2 steps ahead. Like I'm not quite at the level of, players that I've like old roommates I had who were like really killer at chess, and they'd be like 20 moves ahead with their setup. And they read books on it and would memorize like certain intros and stuff like that. Pepsi said, the fact that Trump was ever and still is an option, America needs to change their mantra as a country of immigrants who dislikes immigrants. God on our money. The endless ironies. Sorry to be a doomer, he said. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we got some problems in this country for sure. But I do love this country. Like, weirdly enough, I do love it. And there's a lot of things that need to improve in it, but there's things I really like about the setup of our country. I like the ideas that are presented, by a lot of the founders, not all of the founders. That's one mistake a lot of people make, is like thinking all of the founders they agree with. It's like, well, how can you agree with everybody who disagreed? A lot of them were great people, but man, there's a couple of the founders that I would probably have not fully agreed with, right? And I'm kind of glad there were other people in the room that disagreed with them, so we didn't end up with their ideal version of things, But in general, I do think like the principles of a liberal society are important, where there's freedom of religion, there's freedom of speech, freedom of press. Like, these are the ideals that I thought we were all kind of fans of, left or right, for a little bit there. I kind of lost that delusion after a while about the right, because I realized, like, I don't think, and don't get me wrong, it's not like the left's like a million times better with this stuff, but I don't think a lot of people, when people say they want freedom of speech, I don't think they mean that. I think they just want to say mean things without consequence. That's my opinion. I think a lot of people who are very vocal about freedom of speech don't want people free to speak. They just want to say freedom of speech whenever they're called out for saying something horrendous. And then they're like, yeah, freedom of speech. But they have no problems canceling people or crushing people just as long as it's not their people, you know? And that's a weird place to be as a society, I think. Where we have, you know, people who pretend to like these principles that we were, I think, mostly all in agreement on, and kind of pull them whenever they're convenient, you know. I think the freedom of the press is really important, you know. I think that gets real scary too, where it's like the press starts getting controlled or, you know, like excluded from events and stuff like that because, you know, you want to control the narrative. And I think both parties to an extent do that, but it's like I saw a really funny meme on Facebook about this recently. All great conversations start with that, with an old guy saying, "I saw this funny meme on Facebook." But anyhow, so the bit was, it was like I think I can't remember. I'm not going to put on blast who posted it, but I thought it was great. I think it was Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, and then no, it wasn't Palpatine. It wasn't Star Wars related. Sorry, it was basically Sauron, or not Sauron. Is it Saruman? That's Sauron's wizard guy. Yeah, okay, so it's Saruman, and then Gandalf, and it's like a bunch of people saying like, well, they're both really old, and I mean, I saw Gandalf the other day like forgetting his own name, and
Hey, why can't I move?
I don't know, Ben. I think Ben's stuck on a escalator that's going backwards behind me.
I think I'm just experiencing lag.
He says he's experiencing lag. That's very funny. So they were like kind of saying like, oh, this Gandalf guy is really old, and I don't know if I want like these old white men like running, you know, Middle Earth, and like they're really kind of the same. And it's like, no, they're not. Like, there might be commonalities where they're old. But it was a funny meme, and I thought very appropriate. Where it's like, no, we're in a scenario where we have one person who has a team that are literally planning an authoritarian regime led by a madman who literally is one of the worst human beings in the world. You know, I mean, who literally all he does is for himself. He has no concern about the country or anything like that. It's literally a guy who even his own supporters would tend to agree is driven by his own thing. Like he's just like the epitome of a narcissist. And so you have that guy who's literally just invents things every time he speaks. Like every word he says is a lie. He made up something about, he still doubled down on this too. This is the interesting thing about him as a leader. He doubled down on the electric tank thing. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but like he apparently at a rally, I think it was the same rally where he was talking about electric boats are going to force us to have to choose between death by electrocution or death by shark. And I was like, what? But oh my goodness, my kid is in the background doing wild dances. I wasn't quite expecting that. That's pretty silly. So anyhow, like he basically was talking about that, but he also like made this claim that the military is making electric tanks, and that they're forcing electric tanks on the military or something. And it's like it's been completely debunked. It's like there's no electric tanks, there's no plan for electric tanks. Like he just invented this during a speech at one of his rallies because he was like, yeah, we can get people all riled up about anti-environmental stuff by being like, look at this inefficient thing that they're not even making well, when I'm president, I'll stop them from making the thing they're not really making. And then I'll go, yeah, they were making these things. And look, I stopped them. It's like he's literally just inventing his own universe and his own facts. And the thing that is admirable about him is when he's called out on it, because it's just a blatant lie. He's like, no, it isn't. They're making electric tanks. I was like, okay, dude. Anyhow, so that's wild. So you have this guy who just will invent anything that gets him ahead, anything that will make him look good or make him money. He's like the epitome of Mr. Moneybags or whatever from Monopoly. And then you have a guy who's like an imperfect leader who, hasn't made all the right calls and stuff like that, but he doesn't, I wouldn't say looking at Biden that he's like a guy who's making decisions only for his own benefit. I get the sense that he actually cares a little bit about the country. Now, don't get me wrong, you can disagree with his policies and stuff like that, but it's like, again, there's just like a stark contrast in my mind between the two, where you have somebody who literally, if he gets sent to prison, I wouldn't be surprised if he writes like a book that's a bestseller called My Struggle that launches the new American Revolution. And that's a scary place to be. Just the fact that people are even letting that be a choice or a dichotomy is insane to me. That's what I'm getting at is see, Voldemort versus Palpatine would be more like equivalent, but I think it's more like it's almost like a better analogy would be, like the guy, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking out. What's the main guy in Harry Potter, the main wizard? My wife can get me on this. Who's the main wizard in Harry Potter, the good guy? Dumbledore. A better example would be Dumbledore versus Voldemort, right? Where it's like, hey, Dumbledore's got his frailties and his problems and stuff like that, but he's on the good side. That's what I'm getting at. You have one person who's clearly set themselves out to become like a supervillain, like an actual supervillain. Using the power of the state to force people to live the way they want to live. And I don't know, it's a bizarre dichotomy where I'm like, the fact that this is even a conversation where people are saying, I don't know, it's a hard choice because it's between two evils, and I get it, it always is a hard choice and stuff, but this isn't that normal like left right schism or like that normal kind of threat. It's literally a person who wants to. Thomas said, "Did I literally make a Mein Kampf joke?" Yes, I did. Yeah, because that's exactly what Trump would do if he was sent to prison. He'd literally just start his little revolution that way, and he's gonna get power some way or the other. And what better way to rile up his base than getting sent to prison? It's a scary thing that we're even having this conversation and that there's so many people in denial about it. It's very strange. Yeah, I don't know. The amount of people I know that are right leaning and are fully defending the guy and haven't even read the indictments. They haven't even read what's being alleged. And so a lot of them think that it's just oh man, Democrats are just picking on this poor guy because, they just don't like him and he speaks mean things. And it's no, he literally created a false slate of electors. He made his own electoral college. That's a problem. You don't see a problem with that? If an executive, if Biden did that today, I cannot imagine all these like sycophants for Trump would be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I just can't imagine that. Oh, that's true. Dylan's got a good point there. He's like the main wizard guy in Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Yeah, that's true. He is kind of the main wizard. I love that. That'd be like, who was that general in that Patton movie? You know that movie Patton? What was the name of that general? Do you know who I'm talking about? There was a general in there. It's like that. Anyhow. Whatever. I will say I haven't been as like latched into politics in the last like year or so because I've just been like surviving and just kind of getting art done and doing my thing and just trying to kind of ignore the general malaise of a good portion of Americans who've literally lost their minds or literally want like a like there's this whole thing. I mean, the guy who's writing that that contingency plan, like the day one of Trump taking office, what they're going to do, literally calls himself a Christian nationalist. There's this whole movement of Christian nationalists. That is like just the fact that even exists right now in America, like on a great level, is insane. Where it's like, why would anyone who's a Christian want a society that's forcing people to be Christians? And also, why would they want it nationalism? Like nationalism is like, I mean, that's dictatorial rule, you know, that's scary, man. Like that's like, you know, living in a country that's a theocracy it doesn't, you know, our founders, many who were Christian, some of them weren't, but some of them were. And all of them kind of had one point of agreement that was pretty strong, which was like, we really don't want to be in a theocracy, right? We don't want to be in a scenario where everybody is forced to believe the same thing, because that's kind of a dangerous society. And they were coming from a place that had a theocracy, you know, where it's like there was a state church, and if you weren't part of it, you didn't get certain favors, you didn't get certain privileges and stuff. And it was a mild theocracy, but it was enough for, you know, early Americans to be like, nah, let's get out of that. That's bad. You know, and a lot of the people who left, you know, to settle America were persecuted religious sects, you know, and they were like, yeah, we don't want to be in a scenario where we can't practice our religion. And now we have a movement that's like growing in the country of Christian nationalism, which is literally trying to create a nationalistic society that's ruled by a theocracy. It's like, that is the most un-American thing I have ever heard of in my life. I can't think of anything less American than a theocracy. You know? That's just like, that is literally anti-American. Yeah, it's creepy. And Dylan was saying, in God we trust, and other Christian things were added many years later. Yeah, and the thing is, like, even the kind of statement of in God we trust, it wasn't trying to tie it all into one specific theocracy. Thomas was saying nationalism does not necessarily mean dictatorship. It means putting your nation above other nations. No, nationalism is an extreme focus on nation over everything. So it's not just about other nations. Nationalism is dangerously like, you should put government above your family. You should put our nation above everything. And that's kind of nationalism. And nationalism tends to arrive in in tandem with totalitarian rule, just historically. Nationalistic parties tend to be pretty extreme and pretty totalitarian in the rule, and they'll use like nationalism as a way to persecute anyone of differing opinions. Or in the case of a Christian nationalist scenario, it would be anybody of a different religion. It's a theocracy. And you know, it's honestly a veiled version of, you know, white supremacy, which again is an overused term. So like if you use that word, like people are like, oh no, that's a bad word, you shouldn't use that word. And I agree, it's been overused, and maybe that comparison has been made too often, where it's like the sky is falling gets said enough, and then like when the sky is actually falling, it's like too late. But at risk of it being the sky is falling related, overused, and stuff like that, there's a time and place to use, you know, certain terminology, and I would definitely say that that is at least the Christian nationalists that I have come across tend to have like a white homeland kind of fantasy, and use a lot of talking points that are not like that far off from just straight up white supremacists. And that's a little disturbing too. So anyhow, that's like the background of what's going on, from my opinion. But like again, I haven't been following it as closely. Dylan said, before I got on this live, I was recommended a video called God Revealed Obama's Spiritual Identity. I was like, okay, so we are getting crazy up in here. You know what's bizarre? Obama got so much grief for like being like, I don't know, there were so many like theories, like people freaked out because he had a pastor that was a little extreme, and they were like, oh man, this guy is like, and all of them were like, he's not actually a believer, he's like actually like a secret Muslim. Like they had all these theories about Obama at the time. And what's funny is, you know, like Obama like wrote a bunch of books. They weren't ghost written. They were actually written by Obama, like Audacity of Hope and Dreams of My Father, I believe. And these are great books. They're great books. But what's funny is he's just got this long history of like church stuff. He's got long history of like a faith. And it's like it's bizarre that like the right just was like, there is no way this guy is a guy of faith, even though he could quote scripture. He like knew, he had a local pastor, he like had attended church services for like the majority of his life, and yet like you know, everybody just failed to accept this guy's claim of Christianity. And meanwhile, they have one guy, Donald Trump, who can't even pronounce the title of a book of the Bible. He says 2 Corinthians, and has like a long history of infidelity and slander and just being a very avid atheist for a really long period of time. And then like he claims, oh yeah, I was saved like 2 days before I decided to run for office. Yeah, that's me. And they say, what's your favorite part of the Bible? And he's like, well, my favorite part is everything. You know, he does like the most transparent cosplay of a believer in the world. And everybody's like, oh, this guy's clearly a believer, you know, but it's like, but Obama literally was, had like a long history, with it. And yet like to this day, people will like debate that and be like, he wasn't a real believer. What did he say? Remember, Josh, the PE? What does that mean? And then Dylan said the chosen ones in the occult world, many New Agers think that they are the chosen ones due to being a light worker and stuff. They're somewhat of a plague in our community. Yeah, I could agree that. Pepsi said LMAO everything, like getting caught wearing a band shirt and not knowing the song from them. 100%. Yeah, it is like that, where it's like, or it's like the Steve Buscemi thing, right? Where you're just like, hello, fellow Christians, and you have like your Bible or whatever. But the Bible's like upside down, and you know you're paying off prostitutes in the background, like hello, fellow Christians. Do you guys remember the Bible photo op where Trump walked through a crowd of protesters that were being tear gassed to take a photo op by a church that he didn't even attend, that actually like was very opposed to Donald Trump and had to like. And when he took the photo op, he was holding the Bible upside down. Yeah, anyhow. I'm just saying, double standards are insane. These people don't care about religion. They care about, setting up a one world government of their own morality, their own religion, their own race, and everybody else can just kind of eat it. That's basically what they believe. That's what I'm convinced of. I think they're, I don't know. I think, did fascists know they were fascists when they were, supporting fascism? Did they know they were like the baddies, like in that, in that sketch? They didn't know they were the baddies. All right. Anyhow, I am rambling about. I'm heated about politics lately. I don't know why. I think it's just the fact that it's going to be a close election, and how are we in a world where that's even a close election? It doesn't make any sense. It disappoints me and my fellow human beings. Okay. And I don't want to be like the guy who, like, at this point, I feel like you can't give too many outs. Like, I can't be like, oh, well, they're just ignorant. They don't know any better. Like, they just are getting false information. It's like, no, at this point, to not be aware of the threat to democracy that Donald Trump presents, there's a couple reasons you would not know about that. One is you do know about it, you support it, and you just know it'll sound bad to say that you support a total dictatorship run by a strange millionaire that you think should run everything and have full choice over everything. Or number two is like that you are intentionally putting your head in the sand. Like at this point, I don't think there's any like passive viewers who can claim like we didn't know. It's like, no, at this point you should know. If you don't know, you've just been like again, there's a bunch of indictments out there. You can read them all. You can read the felony counts he was charged with. You can read these things. Like, it's not hard to do. You can look at the testimony. You can see where it came from. You can see that it's not like Biden's making a call and being like, put my political enemy in. Like, it's all very transparent and very visible. But the problem is a lot of people aren't going to read it. They're going to go to like Fox News or whatever, and they're just going to hear the little, snippet of it because they don't want to read it. They don't want to know that their guy's a bad guy. They don't want to know that they've been supporting the bad guy. And I think it's got to be intentional at this point. That's what I think. I don't think it's like they don't know any better. They have bad information. I think it's like, no, I think a lot of them are really, I don't know, maybe I'm otherizing too much, but my point is, I do think there is a good percentage of supporters of that man that want to see, this country turn into like a weird theocracy. Yeah. Thomas was saying it's close because Biden is such a bad candidate, but he's not close. to as bad. That's my point. He's not close to as bad. And honestly, if he stepped out, Republicans would win because you always have an incumbent advantage. But yeah, I wish we had a better choice. I wish we were in better times where there was better choice, but there has never been a more clear scenario of like, these are not equivalent things. That's the thing. It's not equivalent. Like, yeah, it's very similar to like the analogies with like Voldemort and Harry Potter or something, where it's like, yeah, they're both wizards. Yeah, I get it. Like, there's some comparisons you can make there, but it's like they're not playing for the same team. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is like one team is like team literally destroy everything in this country, including just making all the founders and previous presidents and like the long history of our country, everybody just roll in their graves for like what their plans are. Or the other, which is like a little more of the same, and more of the same would suck, but it's like, it's I don't know, And a lot of people will be like, well, I mean, how would so many people support like such a obviously evil man? It's like, well, I mean, look into history, man. People support a lot of evil men. Okay, I'm going to save this. I agree with Thomas. I thought, you know what? Here's what I thought. I thought that after Obama, I thought we were going to actually get younger candidates. Because Obama was the youngest president elected. Like, ever. I think a little, or maybe he was like a year older. I can't remember. I think he was the youngest, though. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, in the chats. And so I was just like, wow, because I was so worried before that, because you had like the Bush lineage, and it was like starting to turn into like what felt like a dictatorship kind of, or not a dictatorship, but like a royal family kind of scenario, where it's like, are we really just going to be electing, like cousins and relatives of like these two powerful families that stem back to like the, founding of the country or something? Like, is this really just going to be like royal families? And I remember Obama just being a real breath of fresh air with that, where it was like, okay, here's a young, articulate guy who's gotten into office, and like him or not, you can at least say like he was young, he had new ideas, and he was different. He was more eloquent than any president before or since. That's happened in my lifetime. At least, he cared about writing a good speech and like thinking before he spoke. And I thought that was going to like start a path for like some more youth. But yeah, it didn't happen at all. So yeah, that didn't happen. What ended up happening was the country freaked out. A good percentage of the country freaked out after that and went the exact opposite, where they started electing creepy old white men with just insane ideologies. And almost like, I think in stark contrast to that, because they were so scared of a young, different president. Okay, we're at an hour. I'm going to play a trailer. This will be Kids Say Kemble. If you haven't yet, hit the like button. Hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. I'm going to be doing this stream until I'm done with this rough, which shouldn't be too far away. Yeah, I appreciate you guys who are here. And if you haven't, check out Worst Places to Work too. All right, here it is. Here's a trailer. I'll be right back.
We know the Georgia kids say the craziest thing.
So, little Susie, do you have any brothers or sisters? I understand you're in 3rd grade. How do you like that? Do you like your teacher? You like to do a lot of fun things at school? You got any hobbies, Susie? Any things you like to do when you're not in school? I hear you like to read.
Well, right now I'm reading 2 stories written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It grapples with faith and mental illness. It's ultimately a story about redemption. It's a savage piece of writing. Also, I just finished up Jacob's Apartment, another one by Kemble. Jacob's Apartment weaves together elements of spiritualism and relationship dynamics, as well as atheism, and all the while it deals with abandonment and loyalty. It's a fierce, fierce read.
Do you like ponies?
All right. So here we go. We're going to basically fill this out, get it shaded, and then we will move on to our next panel. So anyhow, it gets me concerned about our country for sure. And I will say they're not ideal candidates at all. But I think the difference even in their agendas and what they're trying to do is pretty stark. And I think that comes to one thing that I think is really important is like liberal value, not liberals like a liberal, like left-leaning liberalism. I mean like liberalism, like the idea of letting people live their lives, and as long as they're not harming other people, who cares? Like that I feel like that was a pretty uniting value in America for a long time, where it's like, hey, like, okay, we'll put in like restrictions and stuff like that. If you're actively harming other people, then yeah, we'll put in like some restrictions and stuff like that. But outside of that, like what you do with your life and your choices, is kind of up to you. And then we'll have government kind of step in when it comes to like poisoning the well kind of scenarios. Like, let's say you're a factory and, you've got like these great things that you're manufacturing, but you also happen to be poisoning the entire waterway of the city. That's where government can play a role and step in and be like, yeah, you have the freedom as a business to do that, but you don't have the freedom to poison people. Or put poison in your products, I feel like that was a very old-timey value, and I definitely think that Biden is more representative of that kind of system of like pushing policies and agendas that more match that as an outcome, giving people more, I think, more freedom from tyranny than like you have in a leader who's literally calling the opposition vermin and basically promising to kind of dominate our government and turn it into a tyrannical state, and has proven it with action. That's the thing. Like nobody like I'm not going to go as far as to say that like he's Hitler or anything like that, but like one of the comparisons that I think people forget is that like Hitler said everything he was going to do. He like wrote it down, and like everybody thought it was hyperbolic at the time. Most supporters of Hitler were like, yeah, I mean, I like the guy, but he's not actually going to do these things that he wrote about doing. And then when he did those things, everybody was like, oh my gosh, like who could have known that he was going to do these things? And it's like all you had to do was take him at his word. And here's a guy, who literally, like, the last time he was in office, tried to overthrow the electoral count in like 4 states. He's on a phone recording doing it, where he's trying to strong arm, the head of the state to change the electoral count, basically saying, I need to find this many votes. And if I don't, it'd be a shame if I don't find this many votes. He's pretty much doing the old school strong arm, to the point of actually like fraudulently setting up his own undemocratically elected electors for the state, overriding the state's authority. And keep in mind, a lot of these states were red states that he was doing this to. So it's not like he was just doing this to like the opposition. He was doing this to his own team, in order to win. So like, this is a man who has no issue going to any extent to kind of retain power. Arguably, I know a lot of people say, oh, he didn't directly tell them to storm the Capitol on January 6th. But that's a stretch. To make that argument is a stretch of semantics. It's a semantic game where it's like, well, he didn't really say it. And it's like, yeah, but we all know. And if you support the guy, Like, there's no way you don't know. Unless you didn't watch his full speech and you watched like a clip where he's like, oh, and be mostly peaceful, after talking about like a trial by combat. Anyhow, so that's the guy that we're dealing with here. There's never been a president ever in our history who's done that. So yeah, we're in new terrain, right? And that's the threat. That's the existential threat that's facing us. And it sucks that it comes down to like, yeah, Biden's got some issues, but also he wants to like forgive people's student loans. He passed a really huge infrastructure bill. Generally has rebalanced the economy. Like the inflation isn't wildly out of control anymore. Brought some resolution to the COVID crisis. I don't, again, like, yeah, he's like got some issues, but we're just not even, we aren't talking about people in the same league. Like, one is big league. I guess that would be a term that Trump would probably use, but one is big league trying to change the democracy to not be a democracy and has actively moved against a democracy. And will lie, cheat, and steal their way to it, and not even with the respect of people's intelligence to even try to hide his lies. Like he'll just bold-faced do it, and then double down on it. And he does it regarding everything in his life, and will continue to do it until he's run our country off a cliff. That's one guy. The other's like, a savvy politician who is a little old and maybe has some policies you disagree with. It's just not the same. Dylan said their channel is called Fourth Cone Restoration, if anyone is interested. First video you saw was them restoring a vintage King Kong movie poster. Oh, nice. Restorations are fun videos to watch. I am obsessed with a lot of guitar restoration videos. I follow a bunch of guitar YouTubers. And if I'm ever having a day where I just need to chill and relax, I'll just put somebody like working on their guitar in the background, and I find it comforting. Does that make sense? Like you'll hear just like this scraping, they're like sanding and leveling. It's how I actually learned how to refret a guitar. Was like watching a bunch of those videos. Was like, okay, now I know how to do it. That's the beauty of YouTube. With anything like that, where if you're super interested. My problem is I'm I've talked about this before, but I think I'm slightly autistic. So that works really well if I'm interested, but if I'm not interested in something, it will be one of the hardest things to learn on the planet. Like if I have no interest in it, if it doesn't pique my like weird, curiosity, but if my curiosity's piqued, man, I'll watch if there's like that weird compulsion, like to make restore a guitar or something. It's like that. I'll figure it out. Jim said, when am I going to get that album of Ronnie James Dio covers? My favorite mention of Dio is Tenacious D, where it's like, Dio has rocked for a long, long time. I probably can't sing the whole song because YouTube copyright strikes and stuff, but that is a great song. And that first album by the D was incredible. If you guys have not checked out, Tenacious D, you should. Especially that first album. It was so good. It was a life-changing album. The gods of rock smiled on that album. But yeah, I don't think I can hit those pitches of Dio. Dio's got like a vocal range that's wild. Just wild. All right. I do have to say, I don't know what it's like. Jim, what's the weather like where you're at? Is it as like boiling hot there as it is here? I'm guessing not. Because right now it seems like it's got to be in the hundreds. I'd look on my weather app, but I'm busy drawing. What do you want me to stop drawing to look at a weather app? Shame on you. Dylan said, I've found a few cool and unique content creators for a couple years. I found 2 hat makers, a guy who makes custom soccer balls, fourth cone a stonemason, and he said he's forgetting some. There's one guy, oh my gosh, these are really fun to watch. I don't watch them as often because they're usually, I like videos where I can kind of hear in the background, like, it's fun to watch a YouTube video, but I like a video where I can like put it on and have the audio playing while I'm working, right? But I have to tell you, there's a guy, I think it's called Baumgartner Restorations or something, and he does old paintings, like so he'll get commissioned by like a museum to like take like a work by one of the masters and like he'll restore it, and he does like YouTube videos of it. And man, I mean, if you've got the time to like watch it, because there's like hardly any audio, it's just showing the process. But watching like a historian painter like literally like restore like an old like oil painting that's just beat up and bring the color and the life out of it again is just kind of amazing. Jim said a current temperature is 85. He said we're looking at a week of sunshine and good times. Your weekly weather forecast is coming right after sports. What was that sound on that LA radio station? Was it KFI or not? It wasn't. I don't think it was KFI. I think it was oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the station, but it would have like a before the I think it was KNX 1070. That's it. KNX 1070 had that before the weather report. Do you remember that, Jim? Am I crazy? Dylan was saying, "Oh, I've seen Baumgartner Restoration before. Yeah, those are great videos, but they're kind of harder to listen to while you're working on projects because it's like, again, that I'd have to be like visually, tuned into like 24/7, and then I'm looking at something and not working on something." Jim said, please ask Mai which would she choose, Josh deeply into InSound Clean Posse or Josh deeply into Norwegian death metal. which would you prefer? If I was really into the ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, or if I was really into Norwegian death metal? Yeah, I knew that would be the answer. That's my wife. She said death metal without like batting an eye. Yeah, I think being heavily into ICP takes you into a region of California that I don't think my or I would ever want to live in. Basically, all my friends who, whenever we talk about something like Insane Clown Posse, we just, and I hope this is no diss. I think people who live in this region would agree that it's a very specific to this region. I think it's a very Riverside thing to be into Insane Clown Posse. It's like a Riverside thing. That's like San Bernardino, Riverside kind of music. And I've said that joke to people who live in Riverside, and they've been like, yep, that's true. It is very Riverside. My wife thinks that you guys should all just like BTS. Get some K-pop in your life. Dylan said, I heard that ICP makeup is hard to read on AI. I've heard that ICP finds it hard to read. Ooh, sorry. I couldn't help it. Yeah, has anybody ever thought about that? That ICP could be saying that they see P? I'm sure that must have been done before. Dylan was saying that his mom was born in Riverside in 1960. Well, that's a different era of Riverside. Riverside, we're talking Riverside 90s and beyond. Because I think that era of Riverside's a little different. But we're talking, 90s and after Riverside are like, especially late 90s and after. I feel like Riverside is the I don't know. I'm surprised there isn't like just an influx of white rappers coming from Riverside. All right, we're getting there, guys. Man, I'm gonna be on so many blacklists after this stream. All the Trump supporters aren't gonna like me anymore because they liked me before. All the ICP fans are gonna be really irate. I'm gonna be getting attacked by clowns and MAGA wearing hats. Maybe the clowns and the red hats will like combine their powers, take me out of this universe. When they talk to me, my last dying words will be like, I shouldn't have messed with ICP. Magnets are really weird. That was one of my favorite bits. There's an ICP song. I didn't know much about ICP at all, and then I had a friend play me that magnets. I can't even remember. It's been a while since I've listened to it, but the gist is like he's talking about all the mysteries of the world that you just can't explain, and he's like magnets. How do they work? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Jim was saying we didn't have a Juggalo wedding. That was one half of the wedding party, okay? Not the full party.
Okay, I'll give you the truth.
I actually think that would be a really funny plot point in like a rom-com. You know, like how like you have like a movie where like people are nervous to meet the family, that kind of thing. Wouldn't it be funny if like one side that they were going to meet was literally juggalos? It's like, hey, before you meet my mom, there's just one thing you need to know. They're all juggalos. It's like, you know, two star-crossed lovers and the warring families are like, one is like maybe the one of the main characters comes from, you know, maybe they're a classically trained musician, you know, who plays in like the local philharmonic or something. Like they're part of the local music scene, like doing like orchestral work, you know, known for their renditions of Bach or something like that. I don't know. And then that person, you know, falls in love with somebody who's equally like very passionate about music, who then has to reveal right before that that their family are all juggalos. That would be hilarious. They're all like avid ICP fans. Like, and then it gets real awkward because like right when they meet, they're like, "We heard you're a musician. We love music." And then they start quoting ICP at him. And he's like, I don't know if I can do this. I think that's a great plot. That needs to happen. Somebody needs to make that real. I can dream, can't I? Insert the intro of Romeo and Juliet. Exactly. All right. We have finished yet another panel, and we have 4 left to go, and then I'm going to break for dinner. And I don't know if I'll be fixed after that. Okay, I'll be right back after that awful joke. If you guys haven't yet, hit like, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live, and make sure you're subscribed. But make sure you click that like button. It's free to do. You just sitting there. Yeah, just hit like. All right. Now we're going to play the last of the Jim Lujan trailers.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon?
Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
Jim just nailed it. It would be called Dinner with the Juggalos. It's like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but the family are Juggalos. This has to happen. That would be amazing. That would be the best. Jim, can we make this your next movie? It's like, it doesn't even have to directly be the Juggalos, but it'd be like a rom-com where this young couple, they've found true love and they're gonna go meet the family, and when they go to meet the family, they're all just dressed as like weird, like white pseudo hip hop loving clowns. And that, I think there's like, I don't know, I don't know enough about juggalos, so I apologize if you're a juggalo and I am misunderstanding your culture. I am so sorry. You'll have to let me know the details, but from what I understand, I think they have like their own words and stuff too, and so it's like they'd be using like all the juggalo speak, all that crazy speak. Verona by Lost Boy Crow is a Romeo and Juliet reference thing, says Dylan. Nice. I'll have to check that out. This doesn't feel like Robert's eyelid. Robert kind of has like a... There we go. That's more like his eyes. Anyhow, we're not doing finals here. We're doing roughs. So I need to just knock these suckers out. I'm gonna knock these out. That's right. Mama said to knock you out. It's been a long time since I've heard that song. Why did Mama say to knock him out? And is it his mother, or is it like, is he, doing like the Elvis thing and calling, his lady mama? Like, is it his sugar mama? Is it his real mama? And why does he need to... I don't remember the context. I just remember the chorus. I don't remember the verse. I'm guessing it's got to be like a diss track or something, but it's like I don't remember any of the verses. I just remember the mama said to knock you out. And why does his mother say to knock them out is the question of our class today. All right. We're getting there, guys. I think I went from like 6 people watching the stream to like 2. they're like, I can't do it. I can't do it. This guy's doing like horrible LL Cool J jokes. Like, this is awful. And I'm like, yes, welcome to the Kremlin. Anyhow, Dylan said I'm gonna have to go. I'll see if I can pop in later. See, it's the mama said to knock you out joke. It's too deep of a cut, I understand. Some of you guys may not know what that reference was. Oh, okay, I'm going to talk about Weezer for a second. So I saw that Spotify had a thing where they had Weezer do the Blue album live. And it was really cool to watch, except that they used their bassist, like not Matt Sharp. They didn't reunite with Matt Sharp. And I'm like, if you're going to honor the Blue album, you guys need to patch it up with Matt Sharp. He should be playing those songs. Those are his bass lines. Dude's still alive. He was the best part of Weezer, and they didn't do it. They had the other bassist dude, who I can kind of understand that, because it's like, man, they've been playing for like 30 years, and I think that guy's been playing with them for 25. So I mean, he really is kind of the bassist of the band at this point. But when Weezer was good, they had a different bassist, and like, couldn't they have like just patched things up just for good old times? I don't know. You let me know if you think that's heresy, but I feel like Matt Sharp not being on that was a real problem. Uh Jim Lujan said, so the other day I'm talking to Bobby Smith from The Cure. There was a KMT DJ that used to call Robert Plant Bobby Plant. Hilarious and pretentious. I love it. Anyhow. I feel like people should start a petition to get Weezer to reunite with Matt Sharp. Get him to like play a tribute thing with them. This is assuming they didn't already do that. Like, I'd feel really bad if it turns out they did reach out to Matt Sharp and he was kind of like, yeah, just have your bassist do it, you know? And then it's like, okay, that's pretty fair, but I am one of the people who prescribes or subscribes, not prescribes. Prescribes would be a real misspeak there. I'm someone who prescribes a lot of medicine. No, I'm somebody who subscribes to the idea, the kind of folklore that Matt Sharp was the secret sauce in Weezer, and after Matt Sharp, it all went to hell. All right, we are getting there, guys. We have another panel getting done. Which is pretty cool because I have to do one more set of roughs after this today. And then we'll be good to start making final pages. Which is a good place to be. So this is David Eckley. We've seen him a little earlier in the story. He is Sophie's husband. And at this point in the story, you start to kind of get the idea that he's a bit of a pushover. Especially in this scene. This scene makes that pretty clear. Anyhow, it was still fun to see them play all the Blue Album songs. I don't think they played the full amount. I think they played like half the album, but it was still fun. I love that album. I think I would put Weezer's Blue Album probably. I can't remember if I did a top 5 with Jim and Gary that had rock on it. And I'm guessing that if I did, that would have definitely probably been on it. Even though I love Pinkerton, it's like I feel like the Blue Album by Weezer is a perfect rock album. Like, it's a great album. Okay. And actually, it's funny because of Weezer, I ended up getting into other music like Pavement, the Pixies. I think even the Breeders, which got me into the Pixies. I think all of that came from Weezer. We don't have to do. What am I doing? I'm like, I just realized I was like shading this a little too well, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a rough. And not that that's well shaded. I'm just saying I was noticing I was getting a little too detailed with the shading, and it doesn't have to be. It's just a rough. So this will be the second opera scene in the book, in a kind of big auditorium. But the other one's a magic show, but it's still in a big opera house. All right. And I know that Ben, my kid, is working on a chess set. I think he's making his own chessboard, which is kind of cool. I think it would be really cool if he gets like super crazy good at chess, and then like tours the world, and everybody's like, this kid's a genius, and I'm like, yes, he is. And then when he's interviewed, basically they'll be like, what, why are you such a genius? And he'll be like, it's because my dad. I'm joking, by the way, but he is a smart kid. He's an incredibly smart kid. My son is I'm very proud of him. And I would say, in spite of having a goofball like me for a dad, he's a pretty smart kid. I don't know where he gets it from. I think he gets it from his mom. Exactly. Maya was saying, could it be his other half? Hello? And I was like, yeah, 100%. I think he gets it from his mom.
Like, I have no idea where he gets it. It's like, not me, so I don't know where he could get it from.
It is for sure from his mom. Jim was saying, so the other day I'm talking to Bobby. Oh, wait. Oh, he said Pavement was vastly underrated, as was Camper Van Beethoven. Yeah, 100%. You know what band I think is underrated, and a lot of people wouldn't say they're underrated, but I think they are? The Violent Femmes. I think the Violent Femmes are very popular and big, but I think they're bigger than... I think they should be bigger than they are, because I hear their influence like everywhere on so many things, like if I'm listening to like Neutral Milk Hotel and I'm like, oh, this is really cool, very interesting album, it's very acclaimed, that kind of stuff, but it's like, dude, Violent Femmes are all over that album. Like you wouldn't have Neutral Milk Hotel without Violent Femmes. There's so much good stuff with the Violent Femmes. That was a great band, and I don't think they get enough credit. Maybe I'm crazy, but I definitely don't think they get enough credit. All right, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. Let's play a trailer, and then we'll do another panel rough. And by the way, I am not going to fix the Don Knotts eye that I just drew on that guy, because it's a rough, okay? I'll fix it later, but it does look like he's Don Knotts. I wish I could do a good Don Knotts impression where he's saying, what do you think, Eckley? Because his eyes are like, twing. Anyhow, all right. Let's see. Let's get a trailer pulled up. All right, this one is going to be... Let's play Philip Chandler's review, and I'll be right back. And his channel's great. You guys should check out Philip's channel.
Hi, my name is Phil Chandler. I'm a freelance artist, illustrator, and cartoonist. Today, though, however, I want to tell you about a graphic novel I picked up recently called Jacob's Apartment. This book was both written and beautifully illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It is the story of a doomed romance that causes the main character to question his beliefs and his faith, while he's also going through other tragedies in his life. Every page has been illustrated by hand and digitally colored with painstaking detail. It is an emotional story that causes you to think and even question things in your own life. And while the story is a tragedy, it is one that I was completely entertained by and I highly recommend. You can currently find this on Amazon or even check in with your local bookstore and see if you can order it. And while you're at it, you can also check out my Instagram at Phil Chandler Arts and also my YouTube channel by the same name, Phil Chandler Arts. And go buy Jacob's Apartment.
Here we're going to do the rest of these roughs. We're going to make this happen, Cap'n. We're going to make it happen. So I've been perusing. So I've told you guys I'm obsessed with these guitars by Guitar Fetish. Or not Guitar Fetish. Guitar Fetish is a good site, though. They sell pickups that are really cool, and I've used to mod guitars. But no, Guitars Garden, which is where Firefly sells all their guitars. And the other day on Instagram, well, it was like last week, actually 2 weeks ago on Instagram, they posted like one of the guitars of my dreams. Like, there is a guitar. Jim might know this guitar. It's very famous. It's very popular, very, very big, very. Anyhow, it's a very big known guitar, very bigly known, and it is basically an all rosewood Telecaster that George Harrison made very famous because it's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful guitars I have ever seen. It's rosewood, which is an all rosewood guitar is just a rad idea. That's one of the best tone woods in the world. I know there's debate about tone woods and whether wood really affects the tone of a guitar or not. I kind of could care less. It's a beautiful guitar, right? It's all rosewood and completely lovely. So then Firefly is going to do their version of that Telecaster and then also a Stratocaster version of it. And and they were like, next week we are dropping these. And with Firefly, here's how they work. They'll drop guitars. I think the way they're able to do this is a suspicion. I don't know anything with it, but I think the way they're able to make such high quality instruments that are like, I mean, they're just crazy. For like a couple $100, these things are set up and play so well. It's hard to believe. I'm just saying, from the two I own, they're really good. They're really quite impressive guitars. And I think one of the ways they're able to do it is they order in batches, but they're not doing like production levels in the thousands. Like, I think they're doing, a few hundred here, a few hundred there of different guitars. That's what I think. I think they do small runs. And it's enough of a run to where they get the cost savings of doing them in bulk, but it's a small enough run to where they can monitor the quality on a level that like a giant manufacturer, say like Fender with their like sub factory Squier, which by the way, I love Squiers. I think they're great guitars. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as the Fireflies that I have. But I think that Squier has the issue of like when Squier is doing a run of like guitars, it's thousands of guitars, so inevitably there's going to be like a drop in quality control at the price point that a lot of Squiers are at. And so you have Squires that have really high quality control that have a really good reputation, like the classic Vibe series and stuff. But it's like those they charge like, close to $500 for, which is still a great deal for a good guitar. But it's like, the higher the quality control, generally, the higher the cost for bigger guitar companies, because they're just you're talking just massive quantities of guitars. I think with Firefly, I think somehow they've managed to order guitars or manufacture guitars in a small enough quantity to get costs down, but like they're really paying a lot of attention to details. And obviously they're going to skimp on some things, like their pickups are never going to be as good as like like they're just not as good of pickups. I haven't found them to be bad pickups though. That's the weird thing. I really like the pickups and the tone of them. But it's like if I play, like my American Telecaster, like after playing, my Firefly, it's like there's a notable, like a massive notable difference between the quality of just what you're getting on the from the pickups. But anyhow, so here's the thing that's interesting. Firefly posts their version of this guitar, and it looks like it's all rosewood. So they were saying they're going to drop it last week. And then I've been paying attention to their website nonstop just to see when it drops. And it was, and then it got a week goes by, they don't drop it. And then it turns out there was a shipment delay from the factory. And so they're possibly going to drop it like mid this week. And I'm like, what's mid? Is that like Tuesday night? Is that Wednesday? So I've been keeping an eye out because I know they sell out real quick. And that is a beautiful guitar. And I also am curious, like if it's real rosewood, I don't know how they get the price where it would be even at all feasible, because rosewood's an expensive wood. I know they use actual rosewood on their boards, on their fretboards, which is interesting because a lot of budget companies, even Fender, has like started using Pau Ferro, which is like a fake rosewood. It's like kind of like rosewood, and I have some guitars that have Pau Ferro fretboards. They're not bad. It's a nice hard wood, but it's not rosewood. And the fact that they have this all rosewood, the George Harrison, I can imagine if it plays anything like my Strat, like it's going to be like a really nice guitar. So anyhow, so that's been a little side project of mine, is like I've been perusing that site to see, because yeah, it's like on my list of guitars I would like to own. That would definitely there's always something, but like that's one of the ones that's like Paul was saying, is this live? Yes, it is. It is live. So how's it going, Paul? How you doing, buddy? So anyway, one of the things that like if someone were to just randomly like put me on a desert island and be like, you can pick one guitar, like if it can be electric and it can have an amplifier, right? Because first thing I'd pick is like an acoustic, right? If I can't have an amplifier, why do I need an electric guitar? But if I have an amplifier and electricity and stuff, but I can only have one electric guitar, and it could be any guitar from like rock and roll history, it would be Harrison's all rosewood Telecaster. Jim was like, the Beatles were very underrated. I started listening to them, and then all of a sudden there's like so many people are into them now. You're right. I think like the Beatles is definitely one of those bands that like not enough people recognize. I will say this about the Beatles though. There is like a strange movement of hipsters who don't want to acknowledge that the Beatles are good. I remember coming across hipsters that would just pretend that that they don't think the Beatles are a good band. And every once in a while I'll meet somebody who's just like, yeah, the Beatles they were nothing. And I'm like, there's a couple musicians, just a few. Like generally I I'll be picky about my own musical taste and stuff like that, but like to each their own. You can like or dislike a lot of bands, but there's a couple bands that I feel are like almost like a personality test where I'm like, if you don't like this, like we might not get along. And I think one of them is the Beatles. I think people who dislike the Beatles and say they don't like the Beatles, I'm going to have trouble trusting that person ever about anything. I just am going to have trouble. Because it's like, yeah, I could understand being like Yellow Submarine is the most annoying song ever written. I can understand that statement. I might even agree with it. That is a really annoying song. But all of the Beatles, their whole catalog, that is a step of a statement. Like that is a jump. So for me, there's that. Another one is Bob Marley. People who like say they don't like Bob Marley, I just don't believe them. I have trouble believing them. And then I feel like maybe this person's just lying a lot. I don't know if that makes sense. Because to me, I feel like you have to at least like some Bob Marley. Like there can't be somebody out there who like sincerely doesn't like Bob Marley. I feel like there's a couple bands like that, right? They're just like barometer bands of like truth, where I'm like, if you're not gonna dig this, like I'm not gonna be able to believe you on anything in life. Anyhow, Paul said, "Is Imagine the Beatles or John Lennon?" I think Imagine was John Lennon, but I think he did it with the Beatles. Now I'm forgetting. I think that was John Lennon, though. It's hard because it's like it was one of his earlier ones, but yeah, Lennon's solo stuff is interesting. Harrison's solo stuff is amazing. One of the funniest things about Harrison's solo stuff, though, is I'm gonna like one of his best songs, "My Sweet Lord," right? It's a great song. It's one of my favorite Harrison songs. It's great. But if you play it side by side with Doodling, 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 it's the exact same song. It's just the lyrics changed a little bit. Anyhow, because I love that song, right? And then I remember one day going down like YouTube rabbit holes or whatever, you know, and then somebody mentioned that there was a lawsuit, right, from that band that did the doodling doodling doodling, he's so fine, doodling doodling, and they clearly found a commonality between that and My Sweet Lord, hurry hurry. It's anyhow. Once that was pointed out, it just shattered my thoughts of that song. Although I still love that song, and I still think Harrison is for the solo stuff. I think Harrison's my favorite for the solo stuff. For the Beatles stuff, I used to think it was Harrison. I still think for guitars, Harrison's All Rosewood Telecaster is one of the prettiest guitars ever made, and the idea of making a whole guitar out of rosewood that's an electric is just so rad and pretty and classy. But I've started more and more to kind of admit, I think my favorite songwriter of the Beatles is Paul, like, which is not like a hot take. That's like the unhipster take, right? If you're a rock and roller, you're supposed to like Lennon. You know, if you're more on the musicianship side, you're supposed to kind of like Harrison. And I do think Harrison was one of the best members. But it's like, man, Paul is just a killer songwriter. Like the Beatles songs that Paul did, I love them. I love them so much. And I think if people were really honest with themselves, they'd admit that Octopus's Garden and Ringo is really the star of the show when it comes to songwriting. I think that's the Beatle that nobody credits, because it's like they don't realize like the genius, the reason, you're gonna listen to any of the iconic Beatles albums, right? Is for that one or two songs that Ringo had a mass influence on, I will say this from that. Did you guys watch the Get Back documentary? It was so good. Or sorry, Let It Be, not Get Back. Let It Be documentary. It's so good. But the thing that I liked on there was you had Ringo kind of coming up with one of his goofy songs, and like all the Beatles are just kind of like, ugh, like Paul, like John, they're like just kind of ignoring him. And he's kind of wandering around like a dope, like in his charming Ringo way, where he's got like his little notepad where he's written his lyrics, and he's looking kind of defeated. And then George goes up to him and is like, no, that's great. And starts working with him. Like, so he takes him to the piano and they start working out the song. And I was like, dude, George was rad. Like George Harrison was like the reason that Ringo ended up, I think the reason that Ringo ended up with any songs that he was able to write for the Beatles. Cause like, he was just like, had his back. He's like, no, Ringo, you have a voice too. We need to know about the Octopus's Garden in the Shade. Paul said he enjoys Paul McCartney and Wings more than the Beatles. I don't, but I do think that he is the best songwriter of the Beatles. But I don't like Paul's solo stuff a lot. Like, it doesn't connect with me for some reason. It doesn't not connect with me. Like, it's not bad. It just doesn't, I don't know. Like a good opposite example is like Simon and Garfunkel, I think, are one of the best bands ever, duos or whatever. And I love their stuff. Like they're one of my favorite music duos or whatever. I just love Simon and Garfunkel. It's part of why like I even learned a little bit of folk movements and stuff on guitar was because of Paul Simon's guitar work and stuff. And which I'm nowhere near. Like he's such a good guitarist and such a killer songwriter. But when Paul Simon did like solo stuff, it's like I can get into that. Like it's really good. It's not, I don't think it'll ever be as good as the stuff done with Simon and Garfunkel, but it's good. It's not bad. It's like and it's got a voice of its own, whereas I don't know, for some reason, yeah, Wings and I just never connected with that. Jim said, dude, that week is so mid. Is mid a thing? Is that what the hip kids are using now? Is that what the cool hip kids are saying? Jim is really in touch with the hip kids. Is mid a thing? What does mid mean? Is that like mid tier? Is that like, I think that would, if it's related to tiers, then I think I've heard it and I'm familiar. Because I know in like internet speak, you have like mid tier, low tier, high tier, right? Dylan said it's my generation's lingo. Dylan, you need to be the translator. You can translate the hip kid talk. But I would imagine mid is like mediocre, right? Is that what it means? What's one of the weird ones? Riz is one of the weirdest ones I've heard, which is just basically like flirting or like having game. It's, Riz is a weird one. Yeah, when I was like, because I occasionally will like sub high schoolers and stuff, and it's like a bunch of them would be like, "Yo, he got Riz," and I'm like, "What is Riz? Like, what the hell is this? What are you saying?" I had a total old man moment, you know. Because I'm sure when I was a kid, people would be like, What's game? Like, what does that mean? You've got game? Like, where are you playing a ball game? Like, you know? But that's kind of what they would use when I was younger. You know, it's like that guy has game, right? Or swag. Swag was slightly in there, but now swag is used for clothes. Swag used to be like, I mean, swag originally was like stuff, you know. Why am I giving fingernails? She's wearing gloves, man. Anyhow, but now swag, I think, is a different thing too. I think swag is like clothes or something, but like swag for a while was like being like smooth, you know, having swag, like walking with a swagger kind of thing. But Dylan's saying Riz means charisma. Yeah, like Riz is like game or like, you know, talking a good game. Anyhow, this is just a rough, so it doesn't matter if her gloves have fingernails. Plus, apparently, we're in a world where we can just all define our own realities, you know. So, Paul said, "I am so out of date. I got my own lingo. It is cool in its own right, as am I." That's what I feel personally. I feel like, you know, I like using dig. I like using rad. I like using, you know, the internet. I like using pencils. I'm just gonna start listing things I like using. No, but anyhow, my point is, I'm pretty content with the lingo I have. Um, I'm kind of comfortable being an old man. I feel like I had an old soul most of my life anyway. I don't know what that even means, but I think sometimes people forget that when they write stories about kids. Um, at least when I was a kid, I remember thinking a lot that other kids were like weird. Like they do kid things and I'd be like, that's a kid thing. That's a stupid kid thing. Like, and thinking that as a kid. And I think people forget that kids can think that, you know, when they're writing for kids sometimes. Where they'll like write something that's like clearly like talking down to kids, thinking like, oh, kids can't handle, you know, anything more than just this. Yeah, like Barney type story, you know, where it's like kids totally can and prefer things that like kind of assume their intelligence. Because even kids, like with things that are like clearly marketed to kids, there's sometimes though where it's like, okay, there are things clearly marketed to kids that like just take off and work, but there's definitely scenarios where it's like, anyhow, just saying. But I do remember as a kid too, also having kind of weird terminology for things because I was using words like dig way after it was out of fashion, you know? Like Jim, you know, when he was listening to the Beatles before it was popular, you know, it's just, we're just cool like that. Oh, my Jim was just doing a bit where he was being like the hipster guy, where he's like, "There's this band I liked, like this cool indie band called the Beatles." I don't think the Beatles have ever not been popular. I'm sure there are some kids who don't know who the Beatles are, but I think most even kids now still know who the Beatles are. I will say, like, the big thing with a lot of kids now is like Nirvana. This is me talking to my wife too, but it's like kids are like really. There's a big resurgence with Nirvana, and then the downside is there's also like a big resurgence with bands like Korn, and like the new metal thing is like really quite popular right now, which is hard for me to understand. As somebody who lived through that, it's like, to put that into context for like a younger person, it's like a couple years back there was this like 80s resurgence that happened, and a bunch of people started wearing these like ugly neon colors again. And I remember when that was happening being like, I hated that in the 80s, and now it's back. It's like they took one of the things from the 80s I don't miss, and that's the thing that they brought back. And I feel the same way about new metal, where it's like, okay, the Nirvana thing, that's rad because and again, this is just my opinion, but it's like the Nirvana thing's rad because Nirvana was great. I loved Nirvana, and that was like really monumental for almost everybody in the '90s. But it's like, to have people be like, Korn is just one of the best bands that ever existed. It's like even people who were into Korn back then, I don't think would have been making that claim. And like, I don't know, just like the resurgence of that is a little weird to me. Yeah, I don't know, but it kind of feels like bringing back like terrible neon colors on clothes again, all over again. I think they're still around. I think. I wouldn't know. Yeah, yeah, it was a weird time, but like, there's just some things I didn't like at the time, and seeing them come back is a little strange. Imagine, like, for anyone who's younger, just imagine whatever it is you like the most about your current time 10 years from now being completely ignored, and everything that you dislike about your current time becoming a trend again later on that will haunt you for another decade. And then you can have a rough idea. Paul said, when I was a kid, I wanted to be 32. I thought I'd be fully formed at 32. Not sure why. Well, that's the thing. I didn't relate to kids as much when I was a kid. And I remember finding kid stuff, some of it really hard to relate with. And so, yeah, so like getting older has been really nice because now I'm old enough to realize I don't relate to anyone at all. I'm kidding. Kind of. Not really. Kind of. We have one panel left. One panel. One stinking panel to do after this one. How are you guys doing? Oh, I don't know. Is that a a reference to the new Top Gun? Because I haven't seen it yet. I never saw I guess it's not even new anymore. Was that good? Is it on streaming platforms now? Because that would be a fun thing to watch. It would be fun to see the sequel to Top Gun or whatever. I wonder if it's any good. I feel like that's not really a new movie anymore. I guess Maverick or whatever. I still haven't seen it. Yes, I am definitely old. Oh, it's like a year old, I guess. But yeah. I know that quite a few people in the Antelope Valley were involved in the making of that, because we have Edwards Air Force Base out here. So there was a lot of pilots locally here that helped with that movie. All right. We're going to play a trailer, and then we're going to finish this sucker up. If you guys haven't yet, hit that the like button. Paul said the new Top Gun was great to me. Nice. And let's do the trailer for Jacob's Apartment.
Clearly it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing things. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams.
Paul was saying, so what was the Top Gun stash? I don't remember. I think it might be the Goose. I don't know. But Dylan was saying, I think so. I will tell you guys, just on a nostalgia topic. So right when I went to break, we had pizza delivered because my wife and I are working and on art stuff. So we're eating pizza for the night. And the pizza delivery guy hands me the pizzas, and in the background he's got like a Miata, like it's not a Miata, it's like a very 80s like kind of red sports car kind of thing, but it's like a midlife crisis sports car, and blasting from his car is "In the Midnight Hour, I need more," and he's like got shades on, like just straight up like 80s shades. He's about my age, but he's dressed with like, his collar turned up, and he kind of puts his like shades down and kind of goes, "Here's your pizza," and then he like pops them back on, like turns around. Yeah, it was like a Fiero. That's exactly what I was looking for, was the word. And then he like walks over to his car, kind of slides across the side of it, and gets in his car. I was like, I just got visited by an 80s pizza guy. He was like the 80s pizza guy. It was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I want to go to that guy's party. He seems like a cool dude. I just couldn't even believe it. Like it was hilarious. The sunglasses, the posture, just the flipped up collar. Like he was in his realm. That guy was born to be a pizza man. It made me want to deliver pizzas. Anyhow, I just thought that was the cool. I wish you guys could have met cool 80s pizza guy. That was kind of amazing. I'm still like processing it. I'm like, did that actually just happen? I was like 80s pizza guy, coolest dude ever. That guy knows where all the cool things are. He knows where all the hip kids are hanging out. Paul said you're one step away from a porn. No. No, indeed. But yeah, it was just I couldn't believe. I still like right now. I'm like still like a little mystified by the fact that out there in the world is a dude just like blasting in a Fiero, like classic 80s jams with his Ray-Bans and his collar popped up, just like, yeah, that's right, pizza time. I was surprised that like on like what I remembered from it was like pizza in the 80s, and I was surprised that like the Noid wasn't like hanging from like he didn't have like a little Noid or dice hanging from his rear view mirror. That's the one way it would have been better. Yeah, that's the one way it would have been better, is if he had the Noid. Or like I don't know if you guys remember, but there was like a 7-Up dot that was the dot with cool shades on. And he was the coolest of the cool. And they had little hanging 7-Up dots that you could have on your rearview mirror, which people used to always dangle from their rearview mirrors back then. Yeah, so Maya and I were, when we were cleaning out the garage, because we rented a U-Haul and just got rid of a bunch of junk in our garage. And we came across this old bin of like stuffed animals and stuff I had as a kid. And one of them was the 7-Up dot. And then Maya was saying that her and her sister used to draw cartoons of that guy, the 7-Up dot. Oh, Dylan said one of the songs I enjoy is Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart. You have no idea. So my friend, a good friend of mine, Brandon, that's like a friend in art school. We had to do like long trips a couple times, like these long road trips. And one of our key things was to listen to The Future's So Bright, I Have to Wear Shades. And then right after that, right, listen to more I Wear My Sunglasses at Night. Because that was definitely a cool thing about the 80s, was the theme of sunglasses as a topic for a song. You know? Paul says, I listen to 70s and 80s all the time at my age. I will tell you that I have been digging back more. That's something I've noticed, is like, I think you tend to like start digging back more into like the archives. Like if you feel disconnected from a lot of music currently going on, it's like instantly like digging back to like stuff that came before me, or stuff that that was around during my youth that I hadn't quite digested. This last week I've been really rocking a lot of the Faces, which is really weird to me, because I think it was Kevin Cross who turned me on to the fact that the Faces were actually good. Because like growing up in the 80s, man, like there was nothing worse than Rod Stewart. Like Rod Stewart was the worst music in the 80s. And so like from a kid's perspective who didn't know Rod Stewart's history and stuff, I was just like, this is awful. Like anytime it was Rod Stewart, it was like a joke when I was in bands, was like, you know, people would be like, let's cover If You Want My Like it was just awful. It was like decadent and horrible and kind of the antithesis of everything like the 90s was rebelling against. And then Mr. Kevin Cross kind of pointed out to me, like, you got to check out the Faces. And I'm like, no, like there's no way I'm going to like anything by Rod Stewart. And he's like, no, check out the Faces. So I did. And it was like, it's so good. It's so good. He was a real rocker. He was like incredibly badass when he was younger. I can't believe it. But Rod Stewart, yeah, was like the man back in the day. Rod the Mod, you know, and like you listen to that old stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's now I get his solo career, right? Because a lot of those people aged out, you know, and then we're like, oh, but it's Rod the Mod, like this guy's a rocker, you know, like. And now I understand why people were into Rod Stewart, because it's like, oh, he had a history, you know, and I hadn't really known that, but the last week I've been like jamming to that quite a bit, listening to quite a bit of the Faces. Oh no. Dylan said, I can't stand that song because when I was young, my dad would dance shirtless to it. Well, that's a pretty understandable reason to not like any song. But good on your dad. You need to, if you're not embarrassing your children, what are you doing in life?
I think that's the Stewart's thing, though. You know, you start music, we'll jump, we'll start music, no matter what, carry, we'll, yeah. It's gotta be it. Yeah.
All right. Paul said hashtag dad goals. Exactly. Your goal in life is to see your children live to an age where they're embarrassed to have you as a parent. That is your goal as a dad. I'm looking forward to the day where I drop my kid off at school and he's looking ashamed and I yell really loud out the window, I love you. And he just gives that look like, why would you do that, Dad? It's going to happen. We'll get there. We'll get there. All right. We're getting closer to where I can eat that pizza that got delivered. Talk about incentives to get your work done, right? We have delicious pizza in the kitchen and salad. Which I don't know if you guys are aware of my salad joke. I feel like salad, if you just pronounce it salad, sounds like a greeting, like a strange greeting from another world. So if you just go salad to you, sir, and salad to you. So anyhow, that's been a thing with salad lately, where I like to call salad salad because it just sounds like salutations, or I don't know. All right. Here we go, guys. With that horrible salad joke. Paul said salad salam. Oh. Dylan said, I can see the vision of that joke. I love it. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me while I worked on this. I'll be streaming again tonight, where we're going to rough out page 116. So if you haven't yet, hit that bell so you get notifications when I'm about to go live, and make sure you're subscribed. I appreciate all of you guys who showed up and hung out with me, and I hope you guys got a lot of art done in the process. If you haven't yet, and you want to hear some cool rock and roll, it's now live on all streaming platforms, so you can check out my solo album, which is The Worst Places to Work. And yeah, you guys should definitely check that out. All right, guys, have a good day, and I will see you on the next live stream. Have a good one, and get a lot of work done, and keep being inspiring. All right, see you guys on the next one. Bye.